Hello everyone, I hope you're having a wonderful day. Today we're going to step into a quiet moment of the story where peace finally returns after a long storm, but a single unread message may change everything.
Someone has to maintain standards.
Will this calm really last for Jack and Tu Tien, or is another test waiting just ahead? If you enjoy heartfelt stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next chapters. After Mrs. Tui is finally arrested, a quiet sense of relief settles over Jack for the first time in months. For a while, he simply sits with that feeling, letting it sink in. The constant pressure in his chest eases. The nights feel longer, calmer. And when morning comes, Jack makes a decision he has been postponing for far too long. It is time to return fully to work. With Lunar New Year approaching, the company is busier than ever. Projects that were delayed now need to be reviewed carefully before the holiday break. Jack puts on his jacket, grabs his notebook, and leaves the house with a clear mind. There is no fear of someone watching from the shadows anymore. No phone calls filled with threats, just work waiting for him. That morning, Jack leads a small team of employees to inspect several ongoing projects. The first site is a rural road project. Dust rises as trucks pass slowly. Jack walks the length of the road with measured steps, stopping often to check the surface, the drainage, the edges. He kneels down, runs his hand over the concrete, and nods quietly. "Write this down," he tells a new staff member, his voice calm but firm. "The slope here needs to be adjusted slightly. If we rush now, it will crack after the rains." The young employee scribbles quickly, nervous but attentive. They move on to a small school construction site. Children's voices echo faintly from nearby houses. Jack studies the classrooms carefully, the windows, the roofs, the stair railings. He asks questions, listens closely to the engineers, and reminds everyone of one thing. "We're not just building structures," he says. "We're building places people will trust with their lives. Do it properly, always." By midday, the team reaches a bridge project near the edge of town. The river below moves slowly, reflecting the pale winter sky. Jack stands quietly for a moment, watching the workers secure steel frames. He thinks about everything that almost fell apart: his company, his family, his future. And yet, here he is, standing steady again. He turns to his team. "Check every joint again before pouring, no shortcuts. If anything feels off, we stop." No one argues. They can see it in his eyes. This is not about pressure or profit. It is about responsibility. While Jack is out there moving from site to site, Tu Tien is at home. The house is quiet. Sunlight falls gently across the small garden Jack once prepared for her. This garden, once a simple gift, has become something deeply personal to Tu Tien, a place where she feels grounded again. She rolls up her sleeves and begins stacking small bricks along the edge of a narrow dirt path. One by one, she lines them carefully, adjusting each piece until it feels right. Her movements are slow, unhurried. There is no rush today. As she works, she hums softly to herself. After finishing the path, Tu Tien kneels down with a small tray of seeds, lettuce seeds. She sprinkles them gently into the soil, then covers them lightly with earth. Nearby, she plants tomato seedlings, followed by a few chili plants. Her hands are steady. Her breathing is calm. For the first time in a long while, her body feels cooperative again. The illness that once drained her strength feels quieter now, not gone but softened. And with every moment spent under the open sky, she feels her energy returning little by little. She pauses, wipes her hands on her pants, and looks around the garden. There is no fear in her chest today, only quiet joy. Around noon, Jack suddenly feels something tug at him. He checks the time, then his phone. No missed calls, no emergencies, just a simple thought. "I miss her." Without overthinking it, Jack tells his team he will step away briefly and heads home. The drive feels different today, lighter, calmer. When he pulls into the yard, he immediately spots Tu Tien near the garden. She is crouched by the tomato plants, brushing soil off her fingers, her face relaxed, her smile soft. Jack watches her for a moment before she notices him. "You're home early," she says, surprised. "I just wanted to see you," Jack replies honestly. Tu Tien laughs lightly. "Did you skip work?" "No," he says. "I escaped." She stands up and walks over. They sit together on the small bench by the garden, shoulder to shoulder. For a moment, neither of them speaks. Jack breaks the silence first. "How do you feel today?" "Better," Tu Tien answers. "Much better." He studies her face, searching for signs of strain, but all he sees is warmth. Relief washes through him. "I'm glad," he says quietly. They talk about small things, the seeds she planted, the road project, how busy the company feels before the holiday. Nothing dramatic, nothing heavy, just life, unfolding normally again. After a while, Jack stands up. "Let's go out, eat something nice." Tu Tien tilts her head. "In the middle of the day." "Why not?" He smiles. "We deserve it." They drive to a small local restaurant, simple and familiar. They order light food, then move on to a quiet cafe nearby. The place is calm, filled with soft music and filtered sunlight. They sit across from each other, sipping coffee slowly. Jack reaches across the table and takes her hand. "It feels like we're breathing again," he says. Tu Tien squeezes his fingers. "It does." Neither of them mentions Mrs. Tui. Neither mentions the fear, the nights of uncertainty, or the pain. Those memories are still there, but they no longer control the moment. For now, love feels stronger than everything else. As they finish their drinks, Jack glances at the time. He knows he should return to work soon, but he also knows this moment matters. "Thank you," he tells her suddenly. "For what?" Tu Tien asks. "For staying, for healing, for believing we'd get here." She smiles, eyes slightly glossy. "I never stop believing." They leave the cafe together, walking slowly back to the car, hands intertwined. Neither of them knows what the future holds, but for now the past has loosened its grip, and that is enough. They return home in the early afternoon, the sun softer now, stretched thin across the sky. Jack drops his bag by the door and rolls up his sleeves without thinking. The garden fence they started weeks ago still stands unfinished along one side, wooden posts waiting patiently. He picks up a measuring tape while Tu Tien brings out a small box of nails and tools. They don't need to talk much. Their movements fall into rhythm naturally, like they've done this together many times before. Jack measures the distance between two posts and marks the spot with a pencil. Tu Tien holds the plank steady while he secures it. The sound of the hammer echoes gently through the yard, steady and unhurried. At one point, Jack pauses and looks at her. "You don't have to push yourself," he says quietly. Tu Tien smiles without stopping what she's doing. "I'm not pushing, I'm living." That answer stays with him. They finish reinforcing the fence, then sit back on the low step, admiring their work. The garden looks different now, more protected, more intentional. A small space carved out for peace. Tu Tien stands up again. "I'm going to get the bananas." She walks to the back of the yard where the banana trees sway gently. Carefully, she cuts down a ripe bunch and carries it back, setting it on the table. "I'll make cakes tomorrow," she says. "The market before New Year is always busy." Jack nods. "I'll drive you." She shakes her head gently. "You'll be working." He doesn't argue. Instead, he peels one banana and hands it to her. They eat quietly, sitting side by side. The afternoon drifts by in small, ordinary moments, sweeping the yard, rinsing tools, watering the new seedlings. As the sun lowers, the air cools. Tu Tien wraps her arms around herself slightly. Jack notices immediately and goes inside to grab a light jacket, draping it over her shoulders when he returns. "You always do that," she says. "Do what?" "Notice before I say anything." Jack shrugs. "I'm learning." They share a small laugh. For a while, they simply sit together on the bench, watching the sky change colors. The fence casts long shadows. Somewhere nearby, a dog barks once, then goes quiet again. Jack leans back and exhales deeply. "It feels strange," he says, "to not be waiting for something bad to happen." Tu Tien nods. "I keep thinking I'll wake up." He turns to her. "And if something does happen again?" She considers this carefully. "Then we face it, like we did before, just maybe a little calmer." Jack studies her face, the steadiness in her eyes. He feels a warmth spread through his chest. "I'm proud of you," he says. Tu Tien looks surprised. "Why?" "For not letting fear steal your joy." She lowers her gaze, touched. "I was scared for a long time." "I know." They sit in silence again. Not an empty silence, one filled with understanding. As evening approaches, Jack's phone vibrates softly in his pocket. He freezes for just a second. Tu Tien notices. "You don't have to check it," she says gently. "I know," he replies. But after a moment, he pulls it out anyway. The screen lights up with a new message. He doesn't open it. Instead, he locks the phone and sets it face down on the bench between them. Tu Tien watches him. "What is it?" "I don't know yet," Jack answers honestly. "And right now, I don't need to." She nods, relieved. Inside the house, the kettle begins to whistle softly. Tu Tien stands up. "Tea?" "Please." She goes inside, leaving Jack alone in the fading light. He looks out over the garden again. The fence, the soil, the young plants just beginning their quiet work beneath the earth. He thinks about the past weeks, fear, chaos, exhaustion, and then about today, work done carefully, hands in the soil, coffee shared without urgency. Tu Tien returns with 2 cups and hands one to him. They sip slowly. Jack finally speaks. "Even if trouble comes again, I'm glad we had these days." Tu Tien leans her head lightly against his shoulder. "Me too." They stay there until the sky turns dark blue and the first stars begin to appear. In the yard, everything is calm. A few meters away, the phone lies silent on the bench. The message remains unopened, and for now, that is enough. After Mrs. Tui is arrested, Jack finally feels safe enough to return fully to work as the Lunar New Year approaches. He leads his team to inspect several construction sites, carefully guiding new staff and ensuring every detail is done honestly and thoroughly. Pouring his focus into work helps Jack regain his confidence and sense of purpose. At home, Tu Tien spends the day quietly rebuilding her small garden, laying bricks for pathways and planting lettuce, tomatoes, and chili plants, gifts from Jack that carry deep meaning. As she reconnects with simple routines, her spirit lifts and her health slowly improves. At noon, missing her, Jack returns home to check on Tu Tien. They talk, laugh, and then go out together for a relaxed lunch and coffee. With most of the hardships behind them, the couple begins to rediscover warmth, closeness, and renewed love, savoring a rare season of calm after so much turmoil.